You know, that first reading from the letter of Paul to the community in Corinth invites us to reflect on the kind of community we want to have here at Notre Dame. The Christian community at Corinth at the time of Paul's letter was only a few years old, but divisions and disagreements had fractured it. There were quarrels among groups who were loyal to Paul and others loyal to Apollos or another preacher. Christians were suing one another in pagan courts. The wealthy members of the community were treating the poorer members with contempt, even at the Eucharistic gathering. And in this passage I just read, Paul addresses their practice of boasting about their spiritual gifts, claiming superiority for their gifts over those of others. These Corinthian Christians, Paul believed, had come to see their particular gifts or abilities as occasions for personal pride, something that exalted the individual over others in the community. That pride, that need to raise oneself above others, led them to disparage what others bring. That, of course, is the zero-sum logic of human pride. My light shines brighter if I can dim the lights of others in people's eyes. Such attitudes were poisonous at Corinth, and they are in any community. The antidote to that poison, Paul suggests, is for people to see their skills and abilities do not rise from themselves, and they are not their individual possessions. They are rather gifts from God, distributed freely for the good of the community, so that the community may be enriched by them. They're gifts to the individual, but for the community. That community is like a body with many parts, and each part contributes to the health of the whole body. That body, Paul reminds the Corinthians, is the body of Christ. You know, we at Notre Dame, like many organizations and communities in our nation, strive to be a diverse and an inclusive community. Sometimes, when we speak about that truly laudable goal, we tend to focus solely on the rights of the individual over against the community. This passage from Paul offers us a rich vision in which the traits and abilities of an individual are not only for him or for her, but for the community. They are given so that the community will be enriched by this diverse set of gifts. We can tend to see our abilities, our talents, our skills as designed for our own fulfillment, for our own good. Paul encourages us to find our fulfillment, our happiness in contributing to the wider community. The message of the passage from the letter to the Corinthians about our gifts and what therefore leads us to the second challenge in today's reading, the passage of the parable from the passage in the Gospel of Luke that was just read, has a profligate sower throwing seeds, some on the path, some on rocky ground, some among the weeds, and some on good soil in the field. The seed gave growth, but the soil on which it fell varied in its capacity to receive the seed and provide for the growth of the plant. In some ground it couldn't take root. In others it took root, but its growth was choked by weeds. In some it was trampled and eaten by birds. The seed was good. It had the potential in the right conditions to grow into a healthy plant and yield fruit for everyone. The problem was with the soil. In many places, it could not receive the gifts the seed had to give. Paul spoke about the dangers of thinking of our gifts are for our personal good and not for the good of others in the community. This reading reminds us that the gifts from God and through others, however valuable they are in themselves, may not bear fruit if there is not receptivity in the places where they are planted. The reading reminds us that we must recognize the gift others brings us if they are to bear fruit. If we fail in this, those gifts can be neglected, trampled underfoot, or choked. I remember a young woman I encountered early in my presidency at the end of her first year at Notre Dame. In a discussion, she expressed great unhappiness and complained a lot about the Notre Dame community and how it failed her. I thought at the time that her complaints were unjustified. I learned later that she and her sister had been raised in a series of foster homes, that she was her sister's primary guardian. And one thing that was bothering her at the moment was that she could not get in touch with her sister because she could not afford to pay the bills for her cell phone coverage. It was not a difficult problem to fix, and it was fixed. And this young woman eventually flourished here at Notre Dame, graduated, and went on to a successful career. One of my most cherished memories at Notre Dame was meeting this same person near the end of her senior year outside the library and hearing her say how much she learned and how much the community here felt like home. It was a particular gift to me of the need to be aware of what chokes growth and what soil needs to be provided. We have in these readings a rich vision for our community here at Notre Dame. We must recognize that our gifts are not only for ourselves, but for the good of this community. And we must provide the soil, do all we can to provide the soil so that the gifts of others may bear fruit. Now, realizing such an ideal is not easy. We all have a tendency to want to exalt ourselves and our gifts. And moreover, other people often frustrate us, disappoint us, irritate us. I'm reminded of a story about a university professor who, though he was a renowned scholar, was condemned to hell for his many transgressions. The devil met him at the gate of hell, and with a sinister smile offered to escort him to his new quarters. The man found a spacious office, a well-stocked wood-carved desk, and extensive bookshelves with all the texts the professor needed to continue his research. That professor, who had been trembling in fear and dejection at finding himself in hell, was overcome with delighted surprise. "How can this be?" he asked. "I'm in hell, but this is a scholar's paradise." "There's just one more thing," the devil sneered. "You remember that most irritating colleague of yours? You'll be sharing this office with him for eternity." I suppose there could be a parallel story with a roommate or two that you've had, you students. We all know how hard it is to see our gifts as intended for others, and to recognize and cultivate the gift of others. But that's our challenge here. That's the challenge in making ours the community we want this to be. Let us then begin this academic year by asking for God's help that our community here at Notre Dame may be a place where the gifts of others, where our gifts serve others, where the gifts of all may flourish and bear fruit.